Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my birth story for our fourth baby, who is right here. I already announced here on YouTube in a post, and I shared on Instagram. You can't really see her right now, but she's snoozing away. But this is our baby girl. We ended up having a girl, so we now have 3 girls and 1 boy. And her name is Davey. She is named after her late grandfather, Dave. And she is just the sweetest little thing. And I am so excited to share with you guys her birth story. Okay, so first thing with this birth is she actually came before my due date, which I could not believe because my other kids, where I went into labor on my own, I did have 1 induction. That was before my due date. But with those 2 that came naturally on their own, they were after 41 weeks. So I was fully anticipating, definitely going to my due date and then going most likely to 41 plus weeks. But she surprised us. She came actually 2 days before my due date. I was 39 weeks and 5 days. So that was a really lovely surprise. But let's back up so I can share with you how this all got started. So I had been having contractions for weeks, very mild contractions. I would have several a day. They would come randomly, but they weren't strong. They didn't feel like they were doing anything. And I actually suspect now that that was my body trying to reposition her better. When I went in for my 38-week appointment, was it 38 weeks? I think. I found out that she was actually oblique, which means her head was kind of over by my hip and she was like diagonal. Her feet were up here, her head was down here. So she was kind of diagonal. So I did a bunch of like spinning baby stuff, a lot of like inversions to try and get her to be fully head down. And when I went in for my 39-week appointment, luckily she had moved head down. She wasn't in my pelvis, she was kind of like floating up there. But she did straighten out, so she was, you know, head down here, feet up here, which was a huge relief. But I share that because I feel like her positioning was off. And that was just kind of like, you know, a significant part of this birth. So a couple days after that appointment, or maybe like a day after that appointment, I ended up throwing out my back. This pregnancy, pregnancy always takes it out of me, but this pregnancy really took it out of me, you guys. Anyway, I threw out my back and that was horrible because, you know, it's very painful. You can't move, you can't do anything. I couldn't pick up my kids. Like, I was just useless. So anyway, so I rested all day. One of my really good friends is a physical therapist and lives nearby, and she actually came over that night and worked on my back, and that helped so much, and I felt so much better by the next day. So that next day, throughout the day, I was feeling so much better. That night I went to like my prenatal yoga class. I was feeling up to it, that I've gone to throughout all of my pregnancies. And I remember we were joking. I was like, I don't know, you might see me here next week. Like, these babies never seem to come out. Oh, and I should also add, like 5 days or so before this, that was a Tuesday night that I went to the class. On Friday, that past Friday, I had lost my mucus plug. So that kind of tipped me off. I was like, this baby's probably gonna come sooner than the others did, because when I lost my mucus plug with them, it was after my due date. But I still kind of thought I had a while. So anyway, so that night I went to bed as usual, and I woke up to a contraction, a very strong contraction at 2 a.m. This contraction felt completely different than all of the ones that I had been feeling, you know, weeks prior. It was much stronger, it was sharper. I really had to relax through it, and it actually, it woke me up. So I just kind of laid in bed and waited for the next one to come. Another one did come. It was about 15 minutes later, so they were very far apart. I think I had like a few contractions like that spread apart, and I was wide awake, so I just decided to get up. So I got up, I went and made myself a cup of tea. I went in the family room and just bounced on my birth ball, finished the cup of tea, and kind of started timing them. But they were really far apart. They were about 15 minutes apart. So after being up for a little while, I just kind of assumed like, okay, this is just like very early labor. They're very far apart. So I just went back to bed. So I continued to have contractions, you know, through the rest of the night, but I mostly was able to just like sleep through them. And then when I woke up that morning, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go about my day as usual. I'm gonna try and ignore these. And I just, you know, we got ready, we did the whole normal morning routine. And I remember I even like posted on Instagram like, oh, you know, my back's feeling much better, yay. And I'm having contractions, but like, I don't know, I had a major false alarm with Beau and a lot of prodromal labor. So I just was like, it's probably nothing. I'm just gonna try and ignore it. But things continued just like that. So they stayed anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes apart. They were very spread out, but they were really intense. And it never stopped. It was very consistent. And I was just kind of getting to the point where I was like, okay, these are difficult. Like, you know, they take full concentration and, you know, I have to really like breathe and relax through them. But they're not getting any closer together. Like I just assumed things would just start to pick up throughout the day. But that wasn't happening. So I was starting to get like a little frustrated because they were so intense and I was trying to go about a normal day, but I like couldn't go about a normal day. And I was just kind of at the point where I was like, okay, I either want these to like pick up and for this to like progress into like real labor, or I just want it to stall out so that I can finally just like rest. So around 2 p.m., so this is like 12 hours into that like funky, strong early labor. I just remember thinking like, these contractions feel way too strong to be early labor. Like I was very thrown off. And all of my other labors, the contractions started out very mild and like gradually built in intensity. And these started off intense from the jump. So I was I had read, cause I was kind of like Googling like what is going on. And I had read that contractions where your uterus is not necessarily dilating you but trying to reposition the baby better can actually feel very intense and can feel very sharp. And that was exactly what I seemed to be experiencing. So I was kind of like, all right, I think I didn't know it was a she at the time, but I think the baby is not in the best position. And just knowing I had thrown my back out literally like less than 48 hours before this, I wanted to go get like another chiropractic adjustment, and I was planning on trying to get one that day, but then I woke up with contractions, so I didn't want to drive all the way out there because it's kind of far. But anyway, so I was like, my back's probably out of alignment still, so she's probably in a weird position, so I'm gonna try and do something about that. So what I did was something called the mile circuit. I did this a bunch in my last pregnancy, trying to get like Beau out basically, and it didn't work. But this time it totally did work. So the mile circuit, you can Google it. It's like 3 different positions that you do for 30 minutes each. So it was around 2 o'clock. I remember saying to Matt, I was like, I'm gonna go do this. It takes about 90 minutes. I'm gonna be like fully focused on this, and you know, hopefully this will either make things happen or we're just gonna like, hopefully it just stalls out. So I went to our room. First one you like lay down, the second one, and then the second one you lay down, and then the third one you either like curb walk or walk on stairs, or you can like do the hula on a big exercise ball, which is what I ended up doing. So that took about an hour and a half, and I had contractions throughout the whole thing, and they were very intense. But again, they were still pretty spread out. By the third move, they had started to get a little bit closer together, more like 7 minutes, maybe like 5 minutes, a 10-minute, every once in a while. So they were getting closer. But this labor was just so weird because it never like followed a really great pattern. It was like always a little bit all over the place. But everything was so intense. So I finished at 3:30, and by 3:45, Matt looked at me and was like, I think we need to call your mom. Like, you are in labor. And I was still kind of in denial because every time that I would sit down, they would space out a little bit more like 10 minutes. And when I had my major fake out with Beau, where we like thought I was in labor, went to the hospital, the whole thing, ended up, he was born like a week later. Every time I sat down or laid down, the contractions would space out. So I was just like fearful that this was like another false alarm, and I didn't want to go in and go through all of that if this wasn't, you know, the real thing. But within like literally 2 minutes, I changed my mind because I was like, these are really intense, and I am starting to feel like this is probably it. So I called my mom, and I was very nonchalant. I was like, I want you to come over. I don't think we're gonna leave right away when you get here. Like, it's not a huge rush, but I think I would just feel better if you're here so that if things take a turn, we can just leave. Because she lives about like 20-25 minutes away. So she's like, okay, no problem. I'm gonna get in the car in a few minutes and I'll be over. So within the like 30 minutes it took her to get there, things like totally intensified. They really picked up, and I just knew. I was like, I am for sure this is happening. I think it's baby time. Whew. Started having, I'm like getting shaky. Started having contractions overnight last night, like probably about 14 hours ago now. Whew. And they've been really spaced out all day, but very intense, like very intense, which really has thrown me off in this like early stage of labor. But I did the mile circuit and then things seem to have picked up. Oh, I'm getting really shaky. And now they're like, just, you know, they've been 2 to 3 minutes apart the past few, so I just called my mom. She's gonna come over. Oh, one's starting now. Hold on. That one wasn't that strong. Anyway, so I called my mom. She's probably gonna be here in like 25 minutes. And I don't know if we're necessarily going to leave then, but I just want her here because I think we're going to be going in. Oh, here we go. So I could just tell by what I was feeling that this baby was coming. And I remember I had one contraction. I was standing in the bathroom and I just yelled to Matt. I was like, babe, we gotta go. Like, this is, yep, this is real, this is happening. Another thing that kind of tipped me off was I was standing in our room just kind of breathing through contractions, and my son Bo walked in, who's like, he's like 19 months now, just kind of like toddled in, and out of nowhere I just like so much emotion hit me of like, he's not gonna be the baby anymore. And I was like so sad and I started crying. And if you know me, I'm just like not a crier. So that was like, Matt looked at me and was like, okay, what's going on? And I was literally like wiping my tears. I'm like, okay, I think this is it, because this is unusual. So that was kind of funny. Another funny thing that happened in this like 30-minute window of like, mom's on the way, we're gonna be going to the hospital. I'm like finishing up packing my hospital bag. Matt runs downstairs and then comes back up with a piece of beadboard with paint samples that he just literally just painted on, because we were supposed to have painters come in a couple days. We've been renovating our laundry room / pantry. And he's like, hurry up, pick a color, because I hadn't picked a color yet. I was like, are you kidding me? I cannot pick a color right now. I am like not in any state of mind. I'm in full-blown labor. So I ended up not picking a color. And it was fine. They came the next week and it was totally fine. But that was just funny. I was cracking up. I took a picture. I shared it on Instagram. I was like, I have to take a picture of this right now because this is the most ridiculous thing I think you've ever done. So anyway, so that was kind of funny. But then, so basically as soon as my mom got there, I feel like at this point I was like starting to enter transition. And I was just kind of like, hi, I need to go. She was like, oh, you're leaving now? Like, you were so calm on the phone. I was like, yeah, we gotta go. Like, we just gotta go. So we said bye to the kids. We got in the car. I was not looking forward to the car ride. Because contractions in the car are not the most fun. But the worst part actually was like sitting down, because I think the baby was just getting lower. When I sat down, I was like, oh my God. And then when I got out of the car, it was like even like worse. Just, I don't know. I had a few contractions in the car. Of course it was rush hour, so it took us like, you normally get there in like 20 minutes. It took us like 30 minutes, but I honestly didn't even really notice because I was just like totally in labor land. But anyway, so we're on our way, and Matt was like, the contractions that I was having in the car, I could feel the baby moving down. And to me, you know, because this is not my first rodeo, I know that that to me is like transition. And once I start feeling that, I usually have, in past experience, I usually have about an hour until the baby comes out. So I told Matt, I said, I think I have an hour. We just really need to get there. And he was like, do you want me to call and let them know? And I was like, no, you don't have to call, you don't have to call. And then a minute later I was like, actually, yeah, I think you should call. So he called, which I'm really glad that he did, because as soon as I got there, there was actually like another mom who was like laboring in the waiting room, and I think she was waiting to go back. But he called and he was like, you know, my wife, this is her 4th baby. She's feeling like she's gonna be pushing very soon. And so as soon as I came in and they knew that I was that mom, they were like, whoop, they brought the wheelchair out and they brought me back so fast. So I'm really glad that he called, because at first they kind of brushed me off. So we went straight back to triage. I was in like full-blown transition at this point. Like I was honestly struggling through the contractions, because transition is, I usually want to be like laying down, completely calm, like completely relaxed and at ease. But I was obviously like walking around. I was like getting changed in the triage room, like into a hospital gown. Like they were checking me. It was just like kind of a cluster. But anyway, so it was very intense. It was very much in transition. And then of course they checked me, and I was 8 centimeters. She said 8, really close to 9. So me and Matt were both just like, yes. So that's always, you know, music to your ears as a laboring mom. You want to know that you are far along. And honestly, like I wasn't shocked by that news, because I just, at this point, I understand how my body labors, and I kind of figured that that's where I was. Anyway, so 8 to 9 centimeters. So they were like, we are going right up. I think I was 80% effaced. I should also mention, we left my house at 4:30. We arrived at the hospital at 5, just to give you like some timestamps. So we got up to L&D. At this point I was already in the hospital gown, and they asked me like, do you want to like try and go pee? And I was like, yeah, I actually do have to pee. So went to the bathroom, and then like I tried to like for like 1 second to pee, but there was so much downward pressure. I was like, nope, like that's not happening. So I was just like, no. And then I was like, I just want to lay down. So I laid down, which was, it helped so much. Like just being able to relax through contractions makes the biggest difference. So I just laid in bed. I was laying on my side, and every time I had a contraction, I just told Matt to press on my hips, which also is a complete lifesaver, especially in those really intense ones towards the end. I got my IV. There was like a little bit of chatter between me and the nurses. They didn't really have time to do like a full, you know, like check-in process. I had probably about 4 to 5 more contractions while I was laying down. I have no idea how far apart they were, but the doctor in this period was like, do you want me to break your water? And I was like, no. I don't know why. Like things are intense enough, and 2, I can tell you that this baby's going to be out very soon. Like we don't need to break my water. But I just said, politely declined. And then after those 4 to 5 contractions, my body started pushing. So every time I literally like, except not with my first, I did like push, because it was, I don't know, it was my first time. I think she didn't come out as easily. But other than that, I typically experience what's called the fetal ejection reflex, where your body literally is just pushing the baby out. You know, there's nothing I can do to stop it, and it's completely involuntary. It's the most wild experience. It's the craziest feeling. But all of a sudden I was just like, okay, I'm pushing, and the doctor came back in. It was very calm. It was just one doctor. It wasn't my doctor, and one nurse. The doctor was very nice though, and very respectful, which I appreciated. And so the first push, my water broke like all over the bed, which is always kind of funny to see. And then the second push, she was really close. Like they could see her head. I remember asking, is her head out? And they were like, not yet, but she's close. We can see her. And then on the third push, whoop, she came out all at once. Definitely felt the ring of fire. It's definitely very intense. Pushing is my least favorite part. But I remember though, getting to that point, like I remember when my body started to push, I was just like with it enough to be like, okay, you've made it. You've honestly made it through the hardest part, because laboring up to that point is so much more work. And I knew that it's not gonna be long. Like it's not gonna be long. We are here. We just have to get through this next part, and the baby's gonna be out, which is gonna be so exciting.
Somebody tell me. Yes, girl.
I thought it was a boy.
I'm like,
So our sweet little girl was born at 5:52. So she was born less than an hour from when we arrived at the hospital. There's like a video, the video that Matt took of me getting out of the car was at like 4:57. So that was like before I even got in the hospital. So She came quickly once I did that mile circuit, and I think once she just kind of got into position, that's kind of what my guess is. She was just ready to go. Yeah, we're talking about you. She was ready to come out, and it was very quick, which was more intense, but that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to arrive at the hospital with just enough time to spare to get like settled before pushing, and that is literally exactly what happened. She was our biggest baby. She's 8 pounds, 5 ounces. She was 20 3/4 inches long, so she's a big girl. Hello, I'm back. We just took a quick nursing break. Trying to remember where I left off, but I feel like with this birth, truly every prayer I had was answered. It was, I mean, other than like the wonky early labor situation, it was very smooth, it was quick, it was very hands-off, which if you know my story, you know that I would much rather have a home birth, or even like a birth center birth with midwives, but I have to be in the hospital because I'm on blood thinners. I have a past history of like a postpartum blood clot, so that's just kind of where I had to be, and I really had to make peace with that. And I feel like with this last little one, I finally did, and it was just like the birth, it was everything, it was truly everything that I asked for and hoped for. It was definitely the most intense out of all of my kids, and that is just because it started off intense from the jump. And it was also kind of weird. It was funny. So with Beau's birth, if you guys know, that which is my last one, I went to the hospital like in labor, everything completely stalled out, and it was just, I went in way too early. But what's funny is, you know, I was timing my contractions on like one of those apps, and it kept telling me over and over, like, go to the hospital, go to the hospital, go to the hospital. And I just kept ignoring it because I was like, I just don't feel like I should go in yet. Like, it just feels too early. But that really kind of got my head, and I was like, maybe I'm like way further along than I think, and I'm just like handling this really well. And I ended up getting there, and I think I was like 4 centimeters. Like, I wasn't, I mean, which is far enough along, but I wasn't that far along. This time around, with timing my contractions, like I said, they were just kind of like all over the place. They never really got into like a nice solid pattern. And I never once got that little message of going to the hospital. It just kept saying, you know, I think it kept saying like, these are practice contractions. And I was like, these are not practice contractions. Like, it was literally telling me that they were Braxton Hicks, and I was like, they are not Braxton Hicks. And had I just waited for the app to tell me to go to the hospital, I would have had an accidental home birth. So it's just kind of funny. Luckily, I knew what to expect this time, so I knew not to listen to that and to listen to my body. But it is definitely, at least in this situation, this time around, it was definitely true for me that it doesn't really matter if your contractions are like a certain amount apart for a certain amount of time. It really more so matters like how you're feeling, and I think it's more important to go off of that. Obviously, if you're a first-time mom, you don't really know what to expect. It's all new, and you don't really know what is what. But anyway, so that is my birth story with Miss